Okay, in this video, we're going to look at the F87 M2, this photo here. A lot of Photoshop, a lot of layers put into this as well. So I wanted to go through how I organized this, what I did on each layer, and of course the folders that I put each of those layers in. There is quite a bit, and we'll go through each one so you can see exactly what the effects were of that layer and what was performed on that layer as well. Now, the first one, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the car layer, but before I get started, what I did is I have a series of 6 images that were light painted separately. I brought those into Lightroom, and what I did is I selected all 6 of the ones that I wanted, and I simply right-clicked and edit in Photoshop, edit as layers in Photoshop. What that does, it brings in the 6 layers into one document so we can start masking each portion of that layer and taking out portions that we do not want. Okay, so let's take a look at the car layer, and what we'll do is we'll kind of let's shut off all of these. Let's put the background on. And the first layer here is a background. This is masked out, this light portion, so don't worry about that. This background layer, 30-second exposure, no lights. I would have adjusted this, the f-stop, if I wanted to get a little brighter or a little darker, but knowing I was going to bang out and get rid of that background, and what I did is just simply did a 30-second exposure for this. So the second one, if we're looking at the headlight layer, this layer, 0.4 seconds, I believe, is what I used for this, and that was simply to get a detail of the headlights and the little taillight detail as well. Third top, this is named top side, and what I did is I used the ice light, moved around the top of the vehicle, holding it high to get an outline of the windows and a little bit of the curvature of the car as well. Next one, top back, very similar to this one here in the top side, but I was behind the vehicle holding the ice light high, and what it did is it gave a little background, a little outline of the car. It didn't necessarily get on the hood, which is unfortunate, but I did fill that in layer, which we'll go through in the cleanup portion. Next was the side. So holding the ice light, I was around this area of the car, making sure none of the light bled into the foreground, and simply went straight across. It was a 13-second exposure, I believe, to get the light on the side of the door, side of the car, and down here on the bottom as well. And finally was the front, and this is just an additional layer as well. Give a little more light to the front so I could mask it out if I needed to. Get a little detail on the bottom portion of the front of the car. Okay, and with the layers, what I did is we'll go through these quickly so you can see exactly what I masked out. And for the headlights, there were some portions here of the headlights that I did mask out. What you'll see is a little bit of the foreground from the light. So what we did is we took that out. The top side, it did illuminate quite a bit. It did have some additional streaks on here as well. I did not want that. So I did mask those out and just left in what I wanted. You'll see on the foreground as well, it's a little too bright for what I wanted, so I masked that out as well. Top back, same thing. When you're high with the ice light was facing the camera. Of course, you're going to get this streak because, of course, it's looking right into the camera. Easy to take out, of course, because it's in the background, but there was also a streak kind of on the windshield. Didn't want that, and this portion on the hood as well. So you can see where I took those out. Headlights as well, you can see it's illuminated on the ground. Great thing is that I can take those out if I want, add them back in if I need. Next with the side, same thing. When you're lighting the side and lighting the front, you're probably going to get some reflections that and some lighting that goes on the same portions twice. You'll see that here on the headlight and some other portions of the car. Simply mask those out, left what I wanted. And the final one with the front, again, here's a little bit of the ice light bleeding through, a little too much on the foreground and a little bit in the car that I have taken out. And that's it for that. So we'll close that up. And one last thing with these, if we're looking at the car layer, is that each of the blend modes are in lighten. I don't think it really matters much for the background because it's on, it's the one that's on the bottom. Probably use that as normal, but all the rest are on lighten. Next thing we went through is the cleanup. Now, the cleanup itself, there's two layers in here. One is cleanup, which is simply going to be cleanup of two things. It's going to be the foreground, and that's picking out little rocks, little debris, things like that on the ground, and the background. So what I did is, and I'll show you the selection, creating a selection with the pen tool is very important in this step, as what it allowed me to do is simply mask out these portions that I didn't need without worrying about it bleeding over into the side. But creating a selection and saving the selection allowed me to bring it up anytime I needed in terms of the editing process. And if we close that here, let's get rid of this selection for now. The other portion of the cleanup is kind of additions of light. Like I said on this portion here, I missed the light. It didn't really illuminate around the hood. I found that kind of important because we want to separate this from the background. So what it does, it adds a little light. This portion here, it didn't necessarily go well. Like it's kind of broken here. So I wanted to create a little bit of light. So what that does, it just gives a little definition so you know exactly where the curvature of the hood is, and of course what that looks like, adding that ice light in. Next thing was with the wheels. So there's two things I did with the wheels. One thing is they are a bit dark, so I wanted to lighten those up, but also create kind of a reflection, because this surface I wanted to look like it was inside in kind of a studio with a shiny surface, a nice smooth surface. So I did two things. So we'll look at both of those. The wheel levels, that's selecting the layers or selecting the wheels itself and increasing with a curves adjustment, and the reflection adds. So see in the ground here, we'll see the wheels that are reflected. That is making a selection around the wheel, duplicating them, and then flipping them over. And what I did is you'll see some little masking here. I just masked out the bottom because of the reflection, of course. It's not going to be the whole wheel. The reflection is going to kind of fade away as you get further away from the actual portion of the car that's reflected. Next up is lighting. Now, this one is pretty extensive folder. There's a bit in here, but I'll show you what I did is that I wanted to create some light under the vehicle, behind the vehicle as well, just give it a little more impact and to separate it from the background. So what I did is I used a light flare. I toned it so it was more cooler in color, and I added a bunch of them in there and adjusted as needed so the reflection would look the way I wanted. So again, I added the selection of the car. Let's load that one more time. So again, when I'm adding reflections below the car, having the selection around the car allows me to put it in without affecting the rest of the car. I don't have to worry about masking it out. I can simply place them behind the car. Let's get rid of that. So I'll show you some of this lighting. As you see, there is a lot of layers in here. We won't go through these too much, but we'll go through them quickly. And let's turn all these off here. Okay, so these are labeled, like we have light on the front wheel, on the back wheel, near the front of the car, near the back as well. There's two lights. The tires, these are actually not reflections. These are kind of shadows because I wanted to add a little bit to the wheels, making sure they're kind of situated and grounded. So we'll go through these, kind of adding the lights. And this is what the flare looks like. So this flare here, nice black background, so you can change the blend mode and get rid of the black, leaving the light. So we'll get rid of that. And all of these layers here, if we're looking at these, is we'll just click them so you can take a look at the additions and how they work and how they affect the photo. So simply adding more and more. Let's add this one. This is a backlight. And this is not exactly a flare. This is just using a brush. Using a brush and adjusting the opacity on that. More light on the front. Near the tires, this is tire 1, tire 2, so some light underneath here. And some more light. Now these layers here that I skipped, I'll show you what these are because the wheels itself, they don't necessarily look like they're there. They need a little bit of shadow. So I just created some small shadows. And that's just making a selection, an oval selection, just filling it with black and adjusting as needed. So, and the final ones, a couple more here. Little light flare on the front, kind of bleeding through. And this one. Now this one, I'll turn this off so we can take a look. Now, if we're looking through this car, you can see black background. We have a little light coming through here. So logically, some of that light would bleed through the windshield. The side windows are tinted, so it wouldn't necessarily be too visible through there, if not at all, because it's pretty dark tint. But through the front windshield, you should be able to see some light behind here. So what I did is I made a selection with the pen tool, tracing out this area and filling that with a light. So I used another light, probably put it around here, so it just bleeds through. So it looks like whatever light source is behind the car is actually legitimately there, and you can see it through the windows. Next up is smoke effects. So this is just adding a little bit more of a mood to the photo. I do this in a lot of my photos. So we'll look at both of these. Let's turn these off. So smoke background, that's adding a little bit of kind of a haze with the impression that with these lights here and a little bit of haze, a little bit of smoke or fog in the photo, you'd see a little bit of that reflection from the lights itself. So there's one here for the background, and one final one that I kind of threw in the back here is that with the impression that maybe there's a small light source off the frame, but I kind of like that as well. Two more to go with. We'll close these, and we're looking at the headlights now. And the headlights itself, they're on, obviously. But again, with the haze that's in the photo that I wanted in the photo, if the headlights are on and it's a relatively long exposure, 10 seconds or more, you're probably going to see some sort of headlight beam. So I created two of those. And how I created these is simply creating a shape. So I created a shape simply, this is for example, something like that. And what I did is I filled that with a white brush using a very large white brush. So it kind of faded away over here. And I adjusted that with the opacity. So this is one with the left and one with the right. So adding those effects to the light. And the photo is pretty much done. The final thing I wanted to do is a little color balance. You notice one thing is that the photo itself, it's kind of cool. The lighting is cool, but there's some elements of the photo that don't necessarily look right. They don't really fit in. And they're in the car itself. The car is warmer. It is a warmer tone to it compared to the background and the lighting. So I did some color balance with both of them. So there's a color balance overall. This is just a slight balance on the background, and what it does, it adds a little blue to the shadows, and that's simply what I did. So I'll show you here for this color balance is simply with the shadows of adding a +2, and it's the same thing with the color balance of the car. Again, what I did, loaded this selection, loaded the car, created a color balance, and adjusted the color balance on the car. Same thing, shadows +2, turn that on. You can see how it blends in much better with the background. Now that the car is cool, to go with the background of the cool background as well. So that's it. Pretty extensive. There's a lot of layers in here, and honestly, going through it, I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out, and when I started playing with the lights, I really did like how the lights were. Looks like a bunch of multiple lights that are around in the background of the car. Some are underneath the car, just giving kind of a scattered lighting look that I really liked. So that's where, if we're getting into these lighting, I didn't really plan to have this many, but as I went through it and started adding more, I could see where some were needed and some didn't work. So I did delete a few, but that's kind of where all this lighting came from. So I had an idea of where the photo is going to go. I didn't necessarily know how long it would take, how many layers it was going to be, but going through, I knew it needed to have some organization with the folders because there was going to be a lot with that. So that's it. That's the F87 M2. That's how I went through this photo quite a bit. I don't usually do this much work on the photo, but with the idea that I had, I wanted to take some time and discover what I could do. And that's pretty much it for the photo. Before we conclude, it looks like I forgot to turn on this mask once again. And there we are. There's the final photo of the F87 BMW M2. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.